So let's now actually just take up both of those ideas, the sport on the one hand and the meeting a foreign ruler on the other. What's the most famous, come on, you're good at this sort of thing. What's the most famous example in British history of a great sports meeting between two monarchs?
Oh, well, would it be Henry VIII meeting his French counterpart?
Absolutely, the field of cloth of gold.
Yes.
Now, what is remarkable, that really centered round, it was an elaborate meeting that fundamentally centered round jousting, but famously also a bit of wrestling, which Henry loses, that famous encounter. But what's remarkable, if you look about that, Lee, is just what an extraordinary determination there was that the two rulers should be indistinguishably equal with each other. Then you use temporary buildings. The French, of course, have got their own buildings there, but the English, the English have to bring over. Do you know what the English do? They bring over an entire prefabricated palace. The French, of course, they're on their own turf, but they have elaborate tents of cloth of gold, which, because nobody reckoned with bad weather in June, they clearly didn't know the climate of Northern Europe. The tents were all blown away with a nasty storm, and the kind of Tudor prefabricated palace, complete with windows, porticos, and everything else, survives very nicely, thank you. But compare that with the complete failure on the British side of realizing what it looked like. I mean, what it looked like was, it looked much more like Trump as, I suppose, really, again, if there's a comparison, Trump on his own turf, in his own house, standing at the top of the steps. Do you know what the nearest comparison was? It's George V, the King Emperor of Britain and India, for the Delhi Durbar of 1911, receiving all the prostrating Indian sovereigns, and Keir Starmer, terribly fond of immigrants, impersonating the role of a subordinate Indian prince, turning up with his sultana in the form of his very rarely seen wife. And again, not even being able to play at golf. Hope all he can do is kick a football around. But what I find extraordinary is the total failure of a government. We have a government, as we may get on and talk about, which is obsessed with what it called comms, communication. Remember, directly descending from that master of the art of lying, Alistair Campbell, who organised all this under Blair, but totally unaware of what, again, in the fancy language, is called optics. What does it look like when you are received as a guest on your own territory?
Exactly.
Did nobody? And what was even more wonderful, of course, I mean, well, we must not simply reserve all our laughter for poor old Starmer. Look at the president of the EU. Look at Madam Doctor. She's a doctor from my own institution, LSE, von der Leyen. I mean, again, a suppliant. What's even more extraordinary, the president of the EU, a would-be rival empire, a would-be rival United States of Europe, coming again onto doubly foreign soil and still not having any form of expressed equality. I mean, and of course, folding over in the negotiations.
I'd like to interject, as a student of monarchy myself and someone who writes upon it extensively. I am fascinated by Trump's particular fascination with monarchy. Here you have one of the world's richest men, one of the world's most powerful men, and he absolutely, like so many other of the world's strong men, when he met Queen Elizabeth, he was humbled. Notwithstanding, some say that he may have preceded her in the walkabout with the soldiers, but nevertheless, there aren't many people that humble someone like President Trump. But I would argue that what he's humbled by is something that all the money in the world can't buy, which is what you possess and your monarchical system offers: the tradition, the millennial plus great chain of history. We can't buy that as Americans. We can buy almost anything else, but not that. And it truly is awe-inspiring.
Well, it isn't. It isn't. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see what the chemistry is when he is received by King Charles. You see, what again I'm trying to get at is that he has replicated the unsubtle aspects of what you're talking about. He has incorporated the essence of monarchy. No, not the history. No, not the magnificent palaces. No, not the millennial collection of jewels. No, not the legends. No, not the family descent and all the rest of it. But remember, can we again be quite blunt? All this is a very recent adaptation in Britain. Our royal house is essentially a German royal house. It owes its position here to the most absolute accident, to the fact that the direct line of the House of Stuart had died out in its Protestant version, and that there was absolutely nobody else available. That it's the creation of a wholly rational, wholly deliberate choice of politics, which, in a sense, was determined that we weren't going to have the reality of a republic, which is what we had. We were going to preserve what Bagehot talks about as the dignified part of the Constitution. We were going to glue that on top, or keep it glued on top of the real functioning machinery. But the problem is, I think, Lee, that it's all looking, both on this side of the Atlantic, both the dignified and the efficient are looking pretty run down. What is striking, I think, and this is what we should now be talking about in America, is how astonishingly Trump's victory, which again was an extraordinarily narrow one. I mean, it was technically, clearly, he got a large majority in the Electoral College, but actually barely a plurality of the popular vote. As I said, the victories in both houses of Congress were extraordinarily narrow. But it's this instinct again that seizes power, that uses it, that dramatizes it, but does something else that shows that you can actually change things. I'm going to say something now which in 6 months' time may come back to haunt me, to hold me up to absolute ridicule and mockery. But let's just try it. I think Trump is in the phrase of Hegel, he's a world historic figure. He's somebody who's changed things. And I think that everybody's desperately wanting such people, because we've got a system of government, this so-called efficient government, government by committee, government by quango, government by extraordinary abstract and complex legal bodies. In other words, all the things that have tried to resist what Trump has tried to do and what Trump has been able to overcome. I think if you look at the early days of Trump, as we can see, we should almost be talking about the first 100 days, shouldn't we? And the first 100 days of Trump, they look like a medieval romance of Trump, as it were, defeating all these enemies, these dark forces, all draped in black gowns, experts, lawyers, people who wear white coats, people who invoke mysterious languages amongst themselves, all the forces of Davos, suddenly all chased away. I mean, really, it's like a scene out of opera. I mean, opera with an ER rather than opera. Very much not a scene out of opera. She belongs to the other side. Do you see the point that I'm trying to get at? That and of course, what is astonishing is then to contrast that with Britain. That Starmer is the leader of the largest majority in the Commons. Is it ever? I mean, you've to go back, I don't know what, 19th century, even before. Quite extraordinary. And yet he can't do anything. He has got, bearing in mind the powers of the British Prime Minister, who, again, using that word of language borrowed from Walter Bagehot, fuses power. In Britain, you do the executive really does control the legislative process if it commands a secure majority in both houses, which Starmer does. Still not able to do anything. The government comes to power saying it's absolutely determined to bring about growth. In fact, quite the opposite has happened. Whereas, interestingly enough, in America with Trump has defied, a bit like Margaret Thatcher. Can I take our minds back to 365 economists who, when Geoffrey Howe decided that he was going to jack up interest rates to squeeze out inflation, denounced it and said, this is absolutely impossible, it will bring about economic turmoil and collapse. And do you know what? He didn't. And Trump has introduced his tariffs. And do you know what? The rest of the world has folded, and the American economy has grown, whereas that of virtually everywhere else, particularly Britain and the EU, sort of piddles along. We have intense arguments. I don't know where you follow these things. We have intense arguments. Oh, we're back to growth. It's 0.1%. These are 1.1% in a quarter. These are mere rounding errors. It is simply extraordinary, and I think what it shows is that Trump has realised that you've got to smash the system. And all the things that seem so disgraceful about Trump, the fact that he ignored rules, the fact that he was rude and vulgar, the fact that he challenged experts and whatever, which everybody thought would completely unfit him for office, have done precisely the opposite.